question. Well, I'll give you an example in 107, the karaoke episode. Especially in that episode, like these songs were scripted. They were, the producers, Jason, everybody wanted specific songs for those moments, especially Rebecca. So Let It Go was a song that was initially chosen. And, with it being a Disney catalog song, they honestly did, they're very particular about, using their songs, and especially in other shows that are not Disney. So that was one that was kind of like iffy until we shot it and got to show them. But initially we got in a denial on that song. So we had to shoot that song and an alternate version because we didn't know if we were going to be able to clear or get an approval on Frozen. But what happened was, like, as much information as we could provide from the script of how the song is not going to be butchered, the song is going to, she's an amazing singer, and there's no like there's no there's no negativity around the song. Once we shot it, I was able to send it to them and get that denial reversed, so we ended up using the right song for that spot. And that was kind of the situation where it was like, they pointed to her singing these Frozen songs to her goddaughter earlier in that episode. So it was pivotal to try and keep that and make sure that we, that we got that win. And then we had a backup song that we shot just in case, because we didn't know like if that was actually going to get reversed or not. And that song was I Will Survive. So it was equally as good of a song. But for that moment, that was something that Jason really wanted, and we were able to get that done. As far as other denials in the episode, in the season, I can't remember. I think it was just one other, but it was like a visual vocal that was scripted that we ended up not being able to use, just because the licensors, the rights holders weren't, they weren't keen on their song being used in the show. And being a first season show, you often have some difficulty with, clearances. But like this season, it seems like we're, because of how great the show is, the writing, the acting, and how well the music is used, I think we're going to have a lot less difficulty clearing most of these songs as they come in.
Your point that we got the Diamond Dogs in.
Oh yeah.
So remember that, Tony? We weren't sure. Thrilling that you can license Bowie music.
Well, and that the other story on that, which I'll tell is there was a obviously the song to point to was Diamond Dogs. Like, they formed this team and call themselves the Diamond Dogs, and it was such a good moment in the season, and absolutely have to use the actual song. But there was the case of it being the Beck cover initially, and then
because he wanted to try that, but then when we got Bowie,
and then we got Bowie, and we're like, there's no, I mean, he's British, and B, it's the original and the best, and I'm so glad we got to use that because it just worked so well at the end.
Well, I mean, it was interesting enough. This was unlike anything I'd scored before, in that before we even saw any footage, really, I went and spent 10 days at Marcus's studio where he lives in the UK. And we were almost, at that point, it was more like making a record than doing what I'm used to, writing to picture. And we put down a whole load of ideas and tried to find the sort of tone for the show based off phone calls with Kip and Jason and reading scripts and the odd kind of clip we'd had here and there. And the sort of emotional beat of the kind of piece came relatively quickly, and we were sort of off to the races in it, we thought. But the things that we actually found hard getting the right tone on was the comedy and the sports stuff, actually. And we look back at a lot of sports movies, and it's a very difficult thing to get right. That actually, I think, to do the sport in a way where it's not sort of cheesy is the wrong word, but in a way where it sort of sits in with the rest of it and kind of keeps an edge, but isn't sort of well, I suppose cheesy is the right word, something that doesn't sound cheesy. And so that was probably the hardest thing to get right. And probably the hardest cue, I think, was the last, in episode 10, the kind of final sporting moment in that, where you think that they're actually, it's very tense. They can kind of, if they're going to pull it off, and then they don't, which I also think is brilliant, because then you're not expecting that. And Jamie obviously then is the one who scores the goal, but Ted doesn't mind, because he sort of would rather Jamie is going on his journey and part of nurturing that. And it's a very sort of, there's a lot of different emotions and actions going on in a kind of 5-minute sort of window there. And I think that was a very challenging thing to get right. But we did have a sort of what we felt was a strong theme to fall back on, but there was quite a lot of back and forth on that. But it was all incredibly enjoyable and just a great thing to work on with great people.
Laughed pretty hard, actually. There's so many gems that come out from watching the dailies, and you can really see them working through the different comedy beats. And we've started season 2, and they've just even elevated it. I think they felt even more confident, and we've just found, you can see they found their stride. But yeah, our first season was a lot of exploration. I think nobody knew really what the show was quite yet. And so our first cuts were always like 40 minutes. And then we were talking about, do we get it down to a traditional comedy time of like 28 minutes? And we never could get there because it just didn't feel right to cut so much of the show. But yeah, we did. A lot of times I would be, RIP to my favorite jokes, but to Jason's, vision for the show. He has such a vision for the show. And sometimes we would cut really funny things, but he would be like, this isn't serving the story or the character, or I don't think this would be in Ted's, character to do something like this. And, it would be something we'd all get a laugh out of, but I don't think it would have been true to the story or the show or the character. And he would ruthless, doesn't have to be there. And he a lot of times would say, okay, we'll remember this for season 2. We'll find a way to get this joke in. And then sometimes we'd really, really want to, hold on to some of the sillier stuff. And but yeah, it's a fair amount of improv that they do. They'll run alt jokes, and sometimes they'll do something just on one take, and you won't have like the reverse reaction. So you're really trying, like, oh God, this is so funny, this thing that Roy's doing. What can I steal to like make the joke work? Or they've been trying to get there, and there's not really like a good button to go out on. So you're constantly trying to like, okay, how do we get this joke in and tell it in a way that's concise and funny and pointed, and like maybe it's something that like ends a scene and we can just like button out. So there's a lot of like workshopping and like massaging that we do with that kind of stuff, where they've almost got it from the different takes, and you're like, okay, I think I can make this funny. I'm thinking of in 5, they do this run at the end about how in the UK their 911 is 999, I think. And then yeah, and so it was that was a lot of like, if you notice in the cut, I'm like bouncing around to try to make the joke land. And so there's always a way. We always find a way, I think. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's a joy when you're working with a great improv actor like Jason. I mean, they have great writers and they'll write a great script, but they'll always have an option for 1 or 2 alts. And instinctively, I think we want to try the script first, because that's what they've spent time writing. So we put that joke in, but Jason's always, asking what other alts do we add here? And I will show him things. And it's fun to go through different choices. Like, Higgins had so many different names for his cat that we could have gone with. I think we settled with Cindy Crawford. Again, none of this stuff was in the script, so they come up with it in the moment. But to Mel's point, Jason, is going more for the arcs of the characters. So sometimes we cut a joke because it doesn't serve the story, but also we will add a joke that might be funny that could have been cut, but we add it because it gets us to a reaction. In 106, when the team is having the meeting and that camera is spinning around the garbage can that they're all sacrificing things. There was we had a bunch of choices in there, but one of the team players sacrificed some sand from a beach, and he's like, I was on the beach with a supermodel, and he was all missing it. And then we only included that joke just to get to the look of Rebecca, kind of rolling her eyes at this she's laughing at misogyny at that point, is the way she's being treated in the press. So that was an example of adding a joke to get to a reaction. But yeah, things are, on the cutting room floor, and then the gems are discovered, and it's fun going through the dailies, and we're not expecting a joke. And then there are great moments like Jason running out of Rebecca's office in episode 10, and he mistimes the leap and hits his head on the door. That was obviously one take and the last take for that day, because he could have hurt himself, but it was a brilliant piece of improv. And I remember the director emailing me and like, you have to include this. So that's always gems that you find working with a great comedic actor, and it makes it fun as an editor, because then we're off script, and then the script then is written in the cutting room and in the edit, and that's thrilling. Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things that as this is coming up here, that I'm sort of pleased that people don't realize is how much visual effects we did for these games. Essentially, aside from, I think, a couple shots, none of these games were shot in a real stadium. They were all shot on a practice field. And we created a fully digital version of basically Selhurst Park, fully CG version of the stadium, and then mostly CG crowd, some plate photography crowd to fill it. So you'll see in all these shots, essentially, they're just playing on a practice pitch. There's a minimal amount of green screen, because once you're moving the camera around that much and you've got these big dynamic shots, there's just no way you can cover everything with green screen. So our green screen, actually scroll up again for a second there. So you see they put the green screen basically just where the electronic signage is, kind of as a reference, and then also just behind the goal, because the net is very difficult to roto out. But everything else is basically rotoed out. You see that we put our digital lighting fixtures in the same places as the practical lights, so that all the natural flares, and actually you can go down to the next one now, so that all the natural flares that were coming into the shot when they shot it practically could essentially be replicated and sort of smoothed over with our digital flares. So you see all the lights there casting big lens reflections. We strove to repeat that essentially in our digital stadium. You have, in addition to the stadium itself, which was made from a lot of photographic references, we have the people who in some cases were photographic people, but for the majority of the scenes were digi-doubles. And when we were talking about the sound a little while ago, this idea that, each match is going to have people rooting for both sides, and so you want to have different parts of the stadium react differently when things happen. So we had digi-doubles that we had all this motion captured animation, in addition to, again, the photographic, the digi-doubles seated, standing, cheering, booing. And then in addition to assigning different wardrobe to them for their team colors, we could then control, who in what color clothing would cheer at a given time and would boo at a given time. So you can see there's this video that below this one that shows the different reactions essentially that we can trigger simultaneously. And that's just the hoarding on the sides of the field. So yeah, like even the hoarding graphics were all composited in after the fact and made to look like there were LEDs that were burnt out and things like that.
And that became, with those hoarding graphics, it became like an editing challenge because we didn't always know what angle we were going to be on. So we were always like, oh, we got to keep the continuity going on the ad because sometimes we'd cut and it would be a different ad. And so yeah. And also the crowd's reactions were amazing. They just brought the story, so much more to life and have the options of what the crowd could be doing. It was fun to be part of that notes process.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised, I guess. I'm not sure why, because at first I was like, hey, they're playing in a football stadium. There's no way you can do this practically, even if it wasn't for COVID, which had created bigger problems. But I mean, sometimes that's the best compliment that you can get, is that the technical aspect of what you're doing, it just fades into the background and people don't even think about it.
I was blown away, and I work on the show.
Well, you guys did an amazing job with it, Lawson. Like, that's what was so cool about it. And, and you're not even talking about the fact that we didn't even know you were going to have to do all of that. Like, as the season went on, these guys were kept asking, so what are you going to give us and how do we have to put this together? And we go, oh, well, we think we're going to shoot some stuff at Selhurst. So we'll get you some footage from there and then we'll put a crowd in. It'll be great. And then the season went on and the season went on. And they said, well, what are you shooting at? We said, well, we just have to get in at Selhurst, but we think we might not get to shoot all of it there. They go, all right, so we have to do some work on it. Okay. And then the end of the season came and they finished production and they go, all right, we still have to shoot all this football stuff. What are we doing? And they said, well, you're not allowed to shoot at Selhurst. We said, what? Okay. So we called up Lawson and we said, so we can't shoot anything there. And he said, all right, cool. So we build the whole thing from scratch, right? I said, yeah, you got 4 days. And these guys went to work and built an amazing.
Actually 4 days, but yeah.
Fair enough. All right, it wasn't 4 days, but it felt like it in the context of things after 4 months of being in a holding pattern.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But no, these guys built the virtual stadium, all of the interaction and everything, and had it done in time so that Ryan and Sean had time to then fill out the sound. So the combination of everything they did made it feel like we were right there in the stadium. And so nobody asking about the visual effects till now, I think, is the biggest compliment to all of you guys, that this has sort of been hidden behind the curtain for them.
It's an invisible art, but a very visible artist. And Kip, you had to go over there in the blinding, driving, cold, freezing rain to help make sure they got a lot of those soccer shots done correctly. And Kip was so forward thinking to get us pre-visual cartoons. We edited a lot of that with cartoons so we could figure out, well, what type of shots are we going to need? And then Kip, armed with that information, could communicate with production to help them shoot in those scenes in the rain.
Yeah, the process for this stuff was really interesting because Jason and Bill and the writers had a great vision, and specifically Brendan and Joe, who helped create this with them, had a very specific vision for what they wanted the football to play like. And we were able to take the scripted pages and work with the directors and the post house that was helping us with the pre-visualization stuff and really mock up exactly what we were going to shoot when we went over there. So when we finally did figure out where we were shooting it, at least we knew what we were getting. And Mel and AJ became a huge part in crafting that because they would cut with these sort of animatics, these pre-visualized characters that felt like rudimentary cartoons. And we would put those in cuts and they would build them into the story and figure out exactly how it all interacted so that when we went over to shoot it, we had a roadmap to get it done. And then we were just sort of replacing it with the iterations that everybody put together afterwards.